And here we go again. Scott Stevens here with a look at your weather. It's happened around the States and a little bit around the world. We're going to start with some crazy things, some unusual things. You know I'm not afraid to share unusual sky phenomena, whether it be a cloud, a contrail, a chemtrail, some of those unusual things. And over the last 15 years that I've been outspoken would probably be a fair word of what's happening in the sky and its potential impacts on weather, on climate, and certainly now we've got a different climate agenda, but there's a whole other raft of things that are beginning to be acknowledged and things that kind of I'm thrilled to see begin to come out there. But over these 15 years, I've made friends, talked to, I don't want to say influenced, but brought some other information out. And I had a phone call earlier today. John Graff, who's been a subscriber or at least aware of the trails, and we've had some communication in the past, he shared a video of what he saw over the skies of Los Angeles back on July 29th, so inside of a week ago, or just about a week ago. And here in southern Colorado, I've had friends see what were straight lines of these dots falling in the sky. Those likely space X's. They're essentially to be internet from the sky, from space, to try to bring global 5G or ish speed to folks, so you can throw up an antenna and eventually have some kind of connection inside a receiver. But this obviously is not that. And he's done a great job of image stabilization. You pick one target, and then you kind of begin to let the camera follow. So he's used some image stabilization software, and you can see that these are not, what is it called, Chinese lanterns, where you light a candle and it goes up in the sky. These are absolutely something different. And when you see something different, it is immediately recognized as being something different, rather than, say, Venus on the horizon, or a planet that looks like it's coming, looks like it's following you, but nonetheless remains largely stationary, or at least moving no quicker than the sun or moon or stars would move. So this is kind of cool. These are out there. This is happening, and if we were to look at a history of the quantity of UFO visitations, unidentified objects, unidentified aerial phenomena, whatever you want to call them, they kind of hit a peak at around 2014 and then trailed off, and they've begun another ascent. And when something on this planet is big and approaching, they tend to show up simply to notice. As we talked about yesterday with time travelers in another perspective, when there is an inflection in the timeline, when there is a moment in history which goes down in history, we tend to have visitors arriving. And this may simply be one of those events where we have the visitors arriving, and we're simply going to be on our way to something in the books. So this is kind of cool. Almost 1 million without power. We'll get to that, Robert. We'll go there. We're going to start off in Australia, as we do, Robert, over here in New Jersey, and then dealing with devastating winds. There's a lot of video, and yet some really incredible rainfall totals. A bit dryish over there, but especially in New England now. So it's hurricane season. The peak being 10 September. So we're still approaching that. We're still greater than a month away, 5+ weeks. So Albany in Western Australia had its wettest day in 12 years after picking up 81 millimeters of rain. For those English needing the conversion, about 3 1/4 inches, not quite 3 1/4, but nonetheless substantial nonetheless. These are tweets from Weather Zone. He does a daily show, about 90 seconds long, so it's worth a catch. An Antarctic air mass brought snow at low levels, parts of Tasmania and Victoria during the past 12 hours. Snow will continue through the next 2 days in parts of Tasmania, Victoria, and southern New South Wales. Always good to see a little bit of a dusting over some of the higher terrain, as they're not like North America, where we've got land essentially from here to the Arctic Ocean. There's a lot of water between them and Antarctica, and that tends to have an incredible moderating influence on the weather. All right, back home, back to Isaias, depending on your inflection. Now moving through the Hudson River Valley and accelerating to the northeast, upwards of 40 miles per hour. Maximum sustained winds still running about 60, 65 miles per hour. Lowest central pressure is up substantially to 995 millibars. And there's that movement towards the northeast at about 35 knots or 40 miles per hour with another area. And right now it's disorganized, just a few thunderstorms in association with a trough of low pressure. And there's just a 1 in 5 chance of it continuing to develop as we move into the next 5 days. All right, we'll start here in Twitter. And that was some of the storm surge, Myrtle Beach, and it made landfall about 18 hours ago, was all in South Carolina as it pushed ashore and then just really had a lot of spin in it. And that really left a lot of near tornadic or straight up tornadic events as it moved up the coast. Because I can't sort these, this is kind of mixed in there. It's almost been 8 years since Mars Curiosity landed on Mars and found the planet once could have supported life as we know it. And what I like is finally they're releasing pictures of what the skies really look like, intentional or just kind of a clue as to what's happening. Mars is far more like Earth, and I think we could find that it wouldn't be that difficult once we dug in to sustain life there. The explosion in Beirut, which was just horrific. That is there's so much incredible video on that. Not to take away from Ocean City, New Jersey today, where incredible winds, just kind of sandblasting things. If you didn't have your car protected, or your face for that matter, then we were enduring a bit of sandblasting. And any place where it's kind of dry or where the sand is and can be picked up by 20, 30, 40, 60 mile an hour winds, you're going to have some abrasions, and that was the case there. All right, there's some more of that sand as we move to Topsail Beach, North Carolina, covered like snow after Isaias passed through last night, and certainly leaving a little bit of a cleanup. Look at Isaias as it passed Florida and remains a tropical storm, but expected to be a Cat 1 hurricane as it did make landfall. That was exactly the case, but it takes a little while. And since I only visit you once a day, we kind of have to do a wrap-up of some of the cool videos that were shared online as this what didn't really look like it was going to be a beast, but it has held up remarkably well as it has grazed, came ashore down here in mid-South Carolina, and they just slowly worked up into the northeast and continues to accelerate as the westerlies have drawn it in. We're dealing with at least 2.5 million people out of power. This was about 5 hours ago, and half of those power outages are in New Jersey alone. So that state and those power crews are going to be working through the nighttime hours to try to get the system back up and running. And again, you got to do safety checks. Things got to be grounded. Some lines may have to be rerun or just reconnected, but it is a tedious process. And with such a high population density area, all from that tri-state area, it could be a couple of days before that happens. Dolson Town Hospital in southeastern Pennsylvania showing significant tornado damage, including overturned cars. The rain obviously still ongoing at this particular point as the storm had just passed through, but there are more than a few of these kind of videos. And in fact, Eric Fisher from a TV station in Boston, I believe it's WBZ, all of these little stripes are areas where radar had indicated that we were dealing with some kind of tight center of rotation. And those can stay in the clouds, or they can reach down and just like a little a bullwhip can just touch the ground for just a little while. And then you have that little vortice just raking the ground. And with such dense vegetation through here, it can be tough to see. And if it is wrapped in rainfall, then it essentially is invisible except to the radar. So it's an impossible place to storm chase. You just don't. It's just too dangerous to do that. So this is what was happening even into the Hudson Valley, and not quite as far north as too much far beyond Glensville or up into Saratoga Springs, but nonetheless dealing with this kind of heavy rain and rotation. Again, another example, Marlborough, New Jersey, tornado warning issued this morning, and it got so intense that even, I believe it was the mayor of New York City calling his own tornado warning, even though that would be outside of his given authority, shall we say. So Isaias has proven to be a prolific tornado producer over the last 24 hours. National Weather Services offices have already issued nearly 100 tornado warnings across 10 states. So that is significant. And of course, our thoughts and prayers going out to those folks in Beirut. Apparently that was the function of a welder where there were 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that had been confiscated, had been sitting in a warehouse for 6 years. and they were just redoing a weld on one of the enclosures, and that weld started the fire, upon which there were fireworks nearby, and then the whole thing very, very, very quickly cascaded out of control. And then we have the result of some smog and literally poisonous ammonium nitrate, and the result thereof just lingering across the valleys as they have settled now into evening. It happened at about 6:08 p.m. their time, late enough in the day that we got video. People had video and cameras up, but now that evening has settled in, we know what happens. The winds settled down, and then it becomes a very difficult situation for those folks to endure. All right, back to Australia, where they were enjoying some beautiful winter weather, but they've got a couple of storms that will graze the south coast, and maybe even a little bit of an intrusion into the outback, and then spin up some more winter-like weather in New South Wales. So we'll watch that through the week. And then South America has just had an incredible winter as well, with just storm after storm after storm. Probably their wettest, coldest, winteriest winter in the better part of a generation. China's not done. Their rivers are still high, their reservoirs are full, their dams are still stressed, and then the models today still kicking up between 15 and 20 inches worth of rainfall along the coast, and then even into the uplands that drain into the Yellow River, into the Yangtze, and so forth and so on. So their issues will go on. For us stateside, kind of, where is this, 2 weeks? No, I'm right in the present. So let's bring this back. And the cooler weather can continue in the back east, and the northeastern and northwestern states, will kind of get impinged on a little bit with some coastal showers, but nothing too terribly impressive or great. But what we do see towards the end of the period, the blue is where the atmosphere is cooler than typical. The red is warmer than normal. And so we'll see some warmth try to budge up into far northeastern Canada, and then western Canada, and then off into the Pacific Northwestern states to be on the cool side. All right, so just before sunsets, we've got that sunset terminator showing up in the visible imagery right there. The storm rapidly accelerating towards the St. Lawrence River Valley and out of the states and into Canada, and then to be absorbed very quickly into the jet stream. Out west, we've got some showers and thunderstorms along the spine of the Rockies, some cooler weather trying to show up. It's just hot in Texas and Oklahoma, or at least southern Texas, because on the backside of this, north winds. Very, very comfortable north winds have pushed deep into Texas. So it's western Texas that it's warm. And out west, honestly, it's about fires. It's about smoke. Last evening, as we got up close to sunset, you could see just the plumes of smoke coming off the fires in California and Arizona and Nevada and southern Oregon and northern California. The fires were rather widespread, and they're still collecting smoke even at this time. Back to the northeast, and you can see the storm racing towards the northeast. The heavier rains are already retreating in that direction. Of course, they're accompanied by some very gusty winds, and along with the rains. So I would say by 9 o'clock local, we'll have it crossing out of New Hampshire, Vermont, and into Quebec, and moving very quickly off to the north and east. And then there's just some good weather after that. Few severe thunderstorms showing up in the high plains of Colorado. Those are there, even into northern New Mexico. Nothing. I mean, yeah, they're severe, but they're nothing like what they've been dealing with in the northeastern states. The heat in place just farther south, Oklahoma, a reprieve from the heat. Same with Kansas, 70s and 80s and even some 60s at this hour across the Great Lakes states, is that cooler Canadian high sitting right up here across Ontario. Just going to be a slow mover because the jet stream is so amplitude. Big ridges, deep trough, big ridges, that kind of wave pattern just is a slow mover rather than the fast little waves through a typically sourced jet stream. Yes, Vic, it was a Category 1 storm, and just barely, and it lasted for a while, just long enough. Hey, Jane, found this. Good evening. Good to see you out there, out in the San Luis Valley. Kind of a nice day, not too windy. We didn't get too many thunder showers. I think there's a few sprinkles out there, but nothing too terribly intense. Yeah, what a sandstorm. What a sandstorm. And then, yeah, that power outage is big. It's going to be a few days. It's going to be a few days before they get that up. And then, of course, if this is Ryan, what a huge explosion. And that is going to be the story. That is just, and it's an accident. completely an accident, no terrorism. It was just an accident, but impacting millions of people and incredibly expensive. It's truly like a mini nuke went off. But with a nuke, you're going to see that flash of white light, and that wasn't present. So this was entirely a chemical explosion, and with that quantity, remember the Oklahoma City bombing back in April of 95, I believe it was, 94, 95. That was just 2 tons of ammonium nitrate. This was more than 1,000 times more ammonium nitrate, 2,750 confiscated. So it was in the custody of the government. And so the responsibility lies for how that was being dealt with custodially. Here's the cool weather with this couple of high pressures anchored over the western lakes down through Iowa, down into Missouri, as quite literally, this is a taste of fall. It is a taste of fall. Some of the rainfall totals into Jersey, I probably would. No, I'd really like to refresh this and see if we can't get something a little more recent. Some heavy stuff in and around Philadelphia. I can see some 6, 7-inch rainfall totals just outside of Wilmington. Lancaster at 3 inches. Norristown at nearly 7 inches, 6.99. That's about as close as you can get. A little less on the coastal areas. And I'm not sure if that's because we had power outages, if there was obstruction of the rain gauges, if communications went down, if there was debris blown into them. There's a lot of ways that these totals are going to be deficient in relationship to the total amount of rain that fell. 7 inches in and around Allentown. You get to New York City and it drops way off, and that doesn't seem quite right to me. But if you move out into Long Island, they're closer to 1/3 of an inch, and then the heavier totals should show up as we move up the Hudson River Valley, 3.6 inches. Looks like 3 inches as we get close to the capital cities district, Schenectady at about 2.68, and so forth, and 3 inches as we get up into Clifton Park and environs. So plenty wet. We'll get those straight on rainfall totals up into Maine and New Hampshire. The drought reports have it rather dry, so the rains would be welcome. The rivers and streams and creeks, considering how quickly the storm is moving, can absolutely handle it. If it's only a 12, maybe a 14-hour rain event at most, they're not going to be able to overreach those creeks, and the soils are dry enough that is absolutely not a problem. As far as record temperatures, there's not a lot. In fact, what we're dealing with more than anything are some record cool nighttime lows in Kansas City outside of St. Louis as we drop into the middle 50s. Otherwise, a few, what is that, Marfa, Texas at 103 in the next 24 hours. So not a whole lot on the record front coming. So the next 6 to 10 days as we kind of wrap things up. Cool in the west, kind of warm in the middle of the nation, and then that heat is anchored on up and towards New England. And that pattern remains in place for a couple of days yet. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are in the day. It's certainly been an intense day. There's just a lot going on. So tomorrow morning we'll get a better idea of the debris in and around Beirut, the fatality count. Some of the videos that I saw coming in on Twitter were probably the most graphic things I've seen in my life. Just being out and exposed to a shock wave of that magnitude is just it's fatal. It's fatal in many locations, and just the devastation as it rolled out with that shock wave, just unconscionable. Okay, so weather-wise, we'll wrap up Isaias and then look to the Atlantic for another, and it's going to be kind of a quiet week, and that ultimately is not a bad thing. All right, guys, thanks for stopping in. Have a great night, and we'll catch you tomorrow. We'll do another perspective at 6 o'clock after tomorrow's weather, and I think we're going to talk about, tomorrow actually, in my eyes, is the last day of summer for the Northern Hemisphere. The regular calendar drops to 21 September, but as far as the sun is concerned, it's headed south, and from 5 August on, the pace really accelerates. All right, we'll talk about some crazy things then. We'll see you then. Hey, keep looking up.